I thought coming back to Maple Glen was a safe harbor for my two children while I rebuilt our lives. But safety had a price tag I could not see yet. It started with whispered complaints about footsteps in the hallway and ended with my mother staring past me at breakfast, voice flat. She said my kids were too noisy. But when the rest of the family smiled, I knew silence would not save us. It was never about the noise. The sign from Maple Glen, Illinois, looked exactly the same as it had when I left it 10 years ago. It was a tasteful, carved wooden sign surrounded by manicured marigolds, promising a wholesome community and quiet streets. I gripped the steering wheel of my 10-year-old sedan until my knuckles turned white. Glancing in the rearview mirror at the two most important people in my world, Leo was 6, his forehead pressed against the glass, fogging it up with his breath. Sophie was 4, asleep in her car seat with her mouth slightly open, clutching a worn-out stuffed rabbit that had lost one ear. The back of the car was packed so tight with boxes and bags that I could barely see out the rear window. We are going on an adventure week. I had told them. I lied. The truth was a jagged pill I was still trying to swallow. My remote job as a project coordinator had been slashed from 40 hours to 15, losing my benefits in the blink of an eye. 2 days later, my landlord called to say the duplex we had called home for 3 years was being sold to a developer who wanted to tear it down. I had $1,200 in savings, a car that needed new brakes, and nowhere else to go. So, I came home. I pulled into the driveway of the house I grew up in. It was a sprawling 2-story colonial, painted a sensible slate gray with white shutters. The lawn was cut to military precision. There were no tricycles in the driveway here. No chalk drawings on the sidewalk, just pristine concrete and silence. I took a deep breath. Just for a little while, I whispered to myself. Just until I find a new lease. When we stepped inside, the smell hit me first. It was a mixture of lemon polish and potpourri, the scent of a house where no one actually lived. They just existed. My mother, Diane Price, stood in the foyer. She looked good for 65. Her hair dyed a soft blonde and sprayed into an immobile helmet. She was wearing cream-colored slacks and a matching blouse. She did not hug me. She offered a cheek, dry and cool. "Well, you made good time," she said. Leo ran past me, his sneakers squeaking on the hardwood. "Grandma!" Diane took a half-step back, her eyes darting to his shoes. "Shoes off. Leo," she said, her voice tight. "We do not wear street shoes on the hardwood." I felt the tension instantly, a familiar wire tightening in my chest. I rushed forward and gently guided Leo back to the mat. "Sorry, Mom," I said. "We are just excited to see you." Diane smoothed the front of her blouse. "I have prepared the guest room. It is tight, but it will have to do. I imagine you will not be staying long enough to fully unpack." It was not a question. It was a directive. We lugged the bags upstairs. The guest room was exactly as I remembered it. Beige walls, a queen-sized bed with a stiff floral comforter, and 2 decorative porcelain dolls on the dresser that stared at you with dead glass eyes. I sat the kids down on the bed. "Okay, team," I said, forcing a brightness into my voice that I did not feel. "Here's the game plan. This is Grandma's house, and Grandma likes things very quiet and very tidy. So, we are going to be like ninjas. Can you be ninjas?" Leo struck a pose. "I can be a ninja." Sophie rubbed her eyes. "I am hungry. I will make us a snack." I promised. I went downstairs to the kitchen. It was spotless. The counters gleamed. There was not a crumb in sight. I opened the refrigerator and saw Tupperware containers stacked by size and labeled with dates. I felt like an intruder in a laboratory. As I was slicing apples for the kids, my mother walked in. She stood by the island, watching me. "I hope you understand." "Bella," she began, her tone calm and reasonable. "I am used to my privacy. I am happy to help you in a crisis, of course. But we need to have some ground rules if this is going to work." "Of course," I said. "Anything you need. Quiet time starts at 7:30 in the evening," she said. "I watch my programs then, and I need to relax." 7:30. That was barely after dinner. But I nodded. "Okay." 7:30. And no toys in the living room or the hallway. They stay in the guest room. I do not want to trip over a truck and break a hip. And please, tell Leo no running in the hallways. The thumping is terrible for my migraines. I looked at her. She did not look like she had a migraine. She looked perfectly composed. I will make sure they understand. I said, we really appreciate this. Mom, I am applying for apartments every day. It won't be long. She hummed a non-committal sound and turned to wipe a microscopic smudge off the granite counter. For the next 3 days, I worked harder than I had ever worked at any paying job. I woke up at 5 in the morning to answer emails and scour rental listings before the kids were up. By 7, I had them dressed and fed. We were out of the house by 8:30 every morning. I became an expert at killing time without spending money. We spent hours at the public library, reading books until the librarian started to give us pitying looks. We went to every park within a 10-mile radius, even when it was drizzling, just to let them burn off energy so they would be tired and quiet when we got back to the house. I cooked dinner every night. I scrubbed the bathroom after every bath. I vacuumed the guest room daily to ensure no crumbs were left on the carpet. I was trying to be invisible. I was trying to prove that we were not a burden, that we were respectful, that we deserved this small patch of safety. But the house felt like it was rejecting us. Every sound seemed amplified. A dropped spoon sounded like a gunshot. Leo laughing at a cartoon sounded like a riot. Every time the floor creaked, I saw my mother flinch. On the 4th night, my brother Grant and his wife Marissa came over for dinner. Grant was 5 years older than me, a real estate agent with a booming laugh and eyes that always seemed to be calculating the value of everything in the room. Marissa was petite, with a smile that showed too many teeth and a habit of agreeing with whatever the most powerful person in the room said. We sat around the formal dining table. I had made a pot roast, hoping a comfort meal would ease the atmosphere. So, Grant said, piling potatoes onto his plate, back in the old nest. Huh, Bella? Must be nice. Free rent. Home-cooked meals. Living the dream. I gripped my fork. It is just temporary. Grant, just until I find a place. The market is tough right now. Grant chuckled. He took a sip of wine. Market is great if you're selling, or renting to people with good credit. But hey, Mom loves having a full house. Right, Diane? He looked at our mother. She was pushing peas around her plate with surgical precision. I love my family, she said diplomatically, though I admit, I had forgotten how much energy young children have. It disrupts the rhythm of the house. Marissa chimed in, leaning forward. Oh, kids just wreck a calm house. Do not they? Even the good ones. They just take up so much space. I do not know how you do it. Diane, you have kept this place so pristine since Dad passed. I felt a flush of heat rise up my neck. The kids are being very good, I said, trying to keep my voice light. They are being respectful. Leo dropped his fork. It clattered against the china plate with a sharp ting. My mother closed her eyes and exhaled slowly through her nose. Sorry, Leo whispered. It is okay, buddy, I said quickly. Just be careful. Grant laughed again. Careful, kid. Grandma's plates are worth more than your college fund. It was a joke. I knew it was supposed to be a joke, but nobody laughed except Grant. After dinner, I cleared the table while Grant and Marissa sat in the living room with Mom. I could hear them talking. The low murmur of their voices stopped every time I walked in to grab a stack of dishes. I was in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher with excruciating care to avoid any clinking. When Grant walked in, he leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. You know, Bella, he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Mom is too nice to say it, but you are stressing her out. I stopped, a soapy plate in my hand. I am doing everything I can. Grant, we are out of the house all day. We are quiet. I am cooking and cleaning. He shook his head, looking at me with a pitying smirk. It is not about the chores. It is the chaos. You bring chaos with you. You always have. Mom is at a stage in her life where she needs peace. Having 2 screaming kids running around, it is a lot to ask. They are not screaming. I said, keeping my voice low so the kids in the next room would not hear. They are playing. They are children. Grant shrugged. Look, I am just saying. Don not overstay your welcome. Mom has plans. She does not need you dragging her down. Plans? I asked. What plans? He pushed off the counter. Just take care of your kids, Bella, and try to keep them from destroying the place. He walked out, leaving me standing there with the soapy plate, my heart hammering against my ribs. The escalation began the next day. It was subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. It was raining, so we could not go to the park. We were in the guest room, playing a board game on the floor. Sophie rolled the dice and got a double. She squealed, a high-pitched sound of pure delight. Yay! I win! She shouted. The door flew open. Diane stood there, her face tight. Bella, please, she said. I am trying to read downstairs. The shrieking is piercing. I am sorry. Mom, I said, putting a hand on Sophie's shoulder. Sophie, inside voice. Okay? 10 minutes later, Leo got up to go to the bathroom. He walked down the hall. He did not run. He walked. From downstairs. I heard my mother's voice drift up the stairs. It sounds like a herd of elephants up there. Can they not walk softly? I went out into the hall. He is just walking to the bathroom. Mom, I called down gently. It shakes the ceiling fixtures. She called back. That night was bath time. I filled the tub only halfway to minimize the risk of splashing. Sophie was splashing a little with a rubber duck. Water sloshed against the side of the tub. I heard footsteps outside the bathroom door. Bella, my mother said through the wood. There is water dripping through the ceiling. I froze. I looked at the floor. It was dry. There was a bath mat. There was no water leaving the tub. Mom, the floor is dry, I said, opening the door. Look, she stood there, refusing to look at the floor. I can hear it, she said. The pipes are groaning. You are using too much water. It is wasteful. And the noise of the rushing water is giving me a headache. You need to be quicker. I drained the tub immediately, pulling the kids out before they were even done playing. I dried them off in silence, my hands trembling. This is not working, I thought, but I had nowhere else to go. The next morning, I went to the store and spent $50 I did not have on foam playmats. I covered the entire floor of the guest room with them. I bought felt pads and stuck them to the bottom of every toy, every chair leg, anything that could possibly make a sound. I sat my mother down at the kitchen table. Mom, I said, I know the noise has been bothering you. I bought these mats to dampen the sound. We are going to implement a stricter schedule. Quiet hour starts at 6:30 now, not 7:30. We will be out of the house on weekends entirely. I'm really trying here. Diane sipped her tea. She looked at the list I had written out. That is very thoughtful. Bella, she said, I appreciate the effort, but the next day, it happened again. We were in the kitchen. Leo was eating cereal. He crunched a spoonful. It was a normal sound, a human sound. Diane winced. She put a hand to her temple. The chewing, she murmured. I stared at her. He is eating. Mom, it is just so loud, she said. Is there no way to teach them to eat with their mouths closed? He is 6, I said, my patience fraying. And his mouth is closed. This is not working, Diane said, standing up and taking her mug to the sink. The constant noise, the disruption. I cannot live like this. She walked out of the room. I felt like I was going crazy. Was I deaf? Were my children actually monsters and I was just too biased to see it? I started shushing them even when they were whispering. I started feeling a spike of adrenaline every time Leo moved a leg or Sophie took a breath. I was policing their existence to appease a woman who seemed determined to be displeased. Later that afternoon, I was coming down the hallway with a basket of laundry. The door to the study was ajar. I heard my mother on the phone. I stopped. I knew I should keep walking, but something in her tone froze me. It was not the voice of a woman with a migraine. It was sharp, clear, and businesslike. Yes, I understand the occupancy requirements, she was saying. No, there is no lease. They are just guests. I know. I need to show full contribution to equity to qualify for the full amount. Pause. Yes, Grant is handling the paperwork for the refinance, but he says I need to show a clean slate or a revenue stream. I cannot have dependents listed. Pause. I am handling it. I will get the agreement signed or I will get them out. Do not worry. I stepped back, my heart pounding in my throat. Occupancy, equity, revenue stream. This was not about noise. I crept back to the guest room and sat on the edge of the bed. My hands were cold. Grant was handling paperwork. A refinance? Why would she be refinancing? The house was paid off years ago. Dad had made sure of that. And why would my children being here affect a refinance unless she was trying to do something that required the house to be empty? Or, unless she needed to show she was charging rent? I told myself I was paranoid. I told myself I was tired and stressed and turning a snippet of conversation into a conspiracy. Diane was my mother. She was difficult. Yes, she was rigid, but she would not invent a noise complaint just to manipulate me. Would she? The answer came the next morning at breakfast. The kitchen was bright with sunlight, but the air was cold. Diane was at the stove, flipping pancakes. It seemed like a peace offering. I relaxed a fraction. "Good morning," I said, pouring juice for the kids. Diane brought a plate of pancakes to the table. She set it down but did not sit. She stood behind her chair, gripping the back of it with both hands. "Bella, we need to talk." I paused, the juice pitcher in midair. "Okay." She looked at the wall above my head. She would not meet my eyes. "I have been thinking, and this arrangement, it is taking a toll on my health. The noise, the stress. I cannot do it anymore." I put the pitcher down. "Mom, we are being as quiet as humanly possible." I put down the foam mats. "We are barely here. It is not enough," she said, cutting me off. Her voice was rehearsed. I can hear the robotic cadence of a prepared speech. "It is my house, and I have a right to peace. So, here is the situation. If you want to stay, you need to contribute." "Contribute?" I asked. "You mean rent?" She nodded. $500 a month, starting next week, or you need to leave." I stared at her. $500 was almost half of my remaining savings. "Mom," I said, my voice shaking, "I do not have $500 a month. I am looking for a job. I have barely enough to feed the kids and put gas in the car. You know that." She shrugged. A small, stiff motion. "Then you will have to find somewhere else. I am sorry." "Bella, but boundaries are important. The kids are too noisy. I deserve compensation for the stress." It made no sense. If the problem was noise, how would $500 fix it? Money would not make Leo's footsteps quieter. Money would not stop Sophie from laughing. The money was the point. Before I could respond, the back door opened. Grant walked in, as if on cue. He was wearing a suit, looking fresh and energetic. "Morning, family," he boomed. "Smells like pancakes." He looked at the scene, me pale and shaking. Mom gripping the chair. The kids eating silently with wide eyes. "Everything okay?" he asked. Feigning ignorance, "Mom says we have to pay rent or leave," I said, looking at him, because of the noise. Grant nodded slowly, putting a hand on Mom's shoulder. "Well, Bella, that sounds fair. Mom is on a fixed income. You cannot expect a free ride forever. You are a grown woman." I turned to him. "I have been here 5 days. Grant, 5 days, and I am broke." Grant sighed, rubbing his chin. "Look, I hate to see you in a bind. I really do. Tell you what, I have a buddy. Steve. He has got a place across town. It is a basement studio. Nothing fancy, but it is cheap. $300 a month, cash only, no lease required." He pulled a slip of paper from his pocket and slid it across the table toward me. "You could move in today. Problem solved. Mom gets her piece. You get a roof." I looked at the piece of paper. Then I looked at Grant's face. He was smiling, but his eyes were hard. It felt like a trap. The timing was too perfect. The problem created and the solution offered in the same breath. They wanted me out of the house, or they wanted me paying cash into a black hole. And the reason, The noise was a lie. I looked at Leo. He had stopped eating. He was holding his fork, looking from me to his grandmother, his lower lip trembling. He thought this was his fault. He thought his footsteps were the reason we were being kicked out. I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach. It was heavier than the fear. I stood up. I did not scream. I did not cry. I picked up the syrup bottle and poured a little more onto Leo's pancakes. "Eat up, guys," I said, my voice steady. "We need our energy." I turned to my mother. "I will figure it out," I said. I did not agree to the rent. I did not agree to the basement. I just said I would figure it out. Diane looked surprised. She had expected a fight, or begging. She blinked, finally looking at me. "Well, good. I need to know by Monday." I cleared the table in silence. That afternoon, while the kids were watching a movie on my tablet with headphones on, I went into the guest room and closed the door. I pulled a small, spiral-bound notebook from my bag. I sat on the floor, on the foam mats I had bought for nothing. I wrote the date at the top of the page. Incident. Ultimatum delivered. Reason given. Noise. Real reason. Suspected financial motive/refinance. Grants offer. Cash-only basement. No lease. Observation. Mom avoided eye contact. Scripted speech. I stared at the words. My gut told me the story was being shaped against me. They were writing a narrative where I was the leech, the loud intruder, the ungrateful daughter. If they were writing a story, I needed to write one too. I capped my pen. I would not argue in front of the kids again. I would not let them see me sweat. But I would not be the scapegoat they wanted. I was going to find out what was really happening in this house, and I was going to protect my children, no matter what it cost me. I hid the notebook under the mattress. "Okay," I whispered to the empty room. "Let us play." The math did not lie, but it did not care about feelings either. I sat on the floor of the guest room, illuminated only by the glow of my laptop screen and the sliver of moonlight cutting through the blinds. My bank account balance was a terrifyingly small number. The calculator app on my phone was open, and I had run the numbers a dozen times. If I paid my mother $500 a month, plus the cost of food for myself and the kids, plus gas, plus the inevitable small emergencies that came with raising 2 children, I would have exactly $0 left to save for a security deposit on a new apartment. I would be stuck here, treading water, paying for the privilege of being unwanted in my childhood home. I needed a counteroffer. I needed to treat this like a business transaction, because that was clearly how my family viewed it. I typed up a document. It was simple, respectful, and clear. Proposal for contribution. 1. Rent. $250 per month. 2. Utilities. $50 per month. 3. Groceries. I will purchase and cook all meals for the household. 4. Labor. I will handle all housekeeping, lawn care, and snow removal. 5. Move-out date. 60 days from today. It was a good deal. It gave Diane help around the house, covered our added costs, and gave me a realistic window to save enough for a deposit on a cheap 2-bedroom apartment. I printed it out on the inkjet printer in the home office downstairs, careful to retrieve the page before anyone else woke up. The next morning, the kitchen air was thick with the smell of burnt toast. Diane was scraping a piece of bread over the sink, her mouth set in a grim line. "Good morning, Mom," I said, keeping my voice low. She grunted a response. I placed the paper on the table in front of her. I ran the numbers. "Mom, I want to contribute. I want to be fair. This is what I can realistically afford while still saving enough to move out in 2 months. If I pay more, I will never have enough for a deposit, and I will be stuck here. Neither of us wants that." Diane stopped scraping the toast. She picked up the paper, holding it at arm's length. She read it slowly. I watched her eyes track down the list. I saw a flicker of something that looked like consideration, but then her expression hardened. She dropped the paper back onto the table. $250, she said, her voice flat. "That is an insult, Bella. It is what I have," I said, "and I'm offering to do all the housework and cooking. That has value. It does not pay the property taxes. She said, but the house is paid off. I said gently, Dad paid it off 10 years ago. Diane's eyes snapped to mine. They were cold, defensive. Taxes, insurance, maintenance. Houses eat money. Bella, you would know that if you had ever managed to buy one. 500 is the rate. It is the family discount. If I rented this room to a stranger, I could get 800. But you would not rent a room to a stranger. I said, I am your daughter, and you are an adult, she countered. $500, or you can pack your bags. But if I pay 500, I cannot save, I pleaded, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. I will never be able to leave. Then you will have to find a better job, she said, turning back to the sink. Or ask your ex-husband for more money. He is dead. Mom, I said, the words tasting like ash. You know that. There is no money coming from him. She stiffened, but she did not apologize. 500? First of the month. I took the paper back. I folded it into a tiny square until the corners dug into my thumb. Later that afternoon, I tried again. The kids were in the backyard, playing a game that involved whispering to the grass so they would not violate the noise ordinance. I found Diane in the living room. Folding laundry? Mom, please, I said, stepping into the room. Can we just talk? Not about money, about what is actually happening. She did not look up from the towel she was smoothing. I do not know what you mean. You are so tense, I said. You are jumping at shadows. Is everything okay? Is it really just us? Because if you are in trouble, or if you are worried about money, I want to help. We are family. She slammed the towel down onto the sofa. I am not in trouble, she snapped. Her voice cracked. A sudden fissure in her composure. I just need order. I need things to be predictable. I cannot have complications right now. The phrase hung in the air. Complications. Complications with what? I asked softly. She looked at me, her eyes wide and fearful for a split second, before the mask slammed back down. With my life, Bella. With my home. I am 65 years old. I do not need my grown daughter analyzing my moods. I just need you to pay your share or get out. She picked up the laundry basket and marched out of the room. I stood there, listening to her footsteps fade. I cannot have complications right now. That was not the language of someone annoyed by noisy grandchildren. That was the language of someone on a deadline. The atmosphere in the house shifted from cold to suffocating. My brother Grant was suddenly a permanent fixture. He did not live there. He had a nice condo downtown, but he was always around. I would walk into the kitchen at 10 in the morning, and Grant would be sitting at the table with Diane, a stack of papers between them. He would sweep them into a folder the moment he saw me. Hey, sis, he would say, his smile not reaching his eyes, just helping Mom with some bills. He started checking the mail. I used to be the one to grab the stack from the mailbox at the end of the driveway, but Grant began intercepting it. One day, I saw the mail truck pull up and started to put on my shoes. I got it, Grant said, appearing from the living room. I'm already going out, I said. Sit down. Bella, he said. His voice was casual, but his body blocked the doorway. I said I got it. He walked past me, smelling of expensive cologne and aggression. He returned 5 minutes later with a handful of envelopes, flipping through them quickly before sliding the whole stack into his briefcase. None for you, he said. I knew he was lying. I was expecting a letter from the unemployment office, but I could not prove it without tackling him, and I was not going to give them the satisfaction of calling the police on me. I needed to get out of the house. I needed to breathe air that didn't taste like secrets. There was an open house at the local elementary school that evening. Leo would be starting first grade in the fall. Assuming we were still in the district, I dressed the kids in their best clothes, clean jeans and polo shirts I had ironed on the floor of the guest room. We walked to the school. The gym was loud, filled with the chaotic joy of children running and parents shouting greetings. For a moment, I panicked. The noise was overwhelming. I looked at Leo, expecting him to be scared, but he was grinning. He ran toward a beanbag toss game. Go play, I whispered. Be loud. It is okay here. I stood by the refreshments table, clutching a cup of lukewarm punch. I felt like an imposter. These other parents looked established. They looked like they had leases, mortgages, and refrigerators full of food they didn't have to label. "Hi there," a voice said. I turned to see a woman with warm eyes and curly hair, wearing a name tag that read, Tessa Hale, Administrative Office. "Hi," I said. "You look like you need a cookie," Tessa said, sliding a plate toward me. "Or maybe a life raft." I laughed, a startled, genuine sound. "Is it that obvious?" "You have the 1,000-yard stare of a parent in transition," she said kindly. "I am Tessa. I work in the front office. I am Bella. I just moved back to town, staying with family while I look for a place." Tessa nodded, her expression shifting from casual to professional empathy. "That can be tough. The rental market in Maple Glen is brutal right now. Inventory is low. Prices are high. Tell me about it," I said. Tessa lowered her voice slightly. "Look, I do not want to overstep, but part of my job is acting as the family resource liaison. If you are in a tight spot, even if it is just temporary, we have resources. There is a list of short-term rental assistance programs, and some landlords who work specifically with the district to help families stay in the school zone." My face heated up. Shame, hot and prickly, crawled up my neck. I had never needed assistance. I had always been the one who donated to the food drive, not the one who needed the list. "Oh, I think we are okay," I said quickly. "It is just a short-term thing." Tessa smiled, and there was zero judgment in it. "Take the card anyway," she said, slipping a small business card into my hand. "It is not charity, Bella. It is community. We want your kid in school and happy. If you need a lead on a landlord who is not a shark, call me." I took the card. "Thank you," I said. I put it in my pocket, feeling the weight of it. It was a lifeline I hoped I would not need, but knowing it was there made my chest loosen just a fraction. The next day, I met my friend Rowan Mercer for coffee. Rowan and I had gone to high school together. He was one of the few people who had stayed in Maple Glen and made a life of it without becoming bitter. He worked as a landscape architect and had a calming, earthy presence. We sat at a corner table in a coffee shop downtown. I told him everything. The noise complaints, the rent demand, Grant's hovering, the weird feeling that I was being watched. Rowan frowned, tracing the rim of his cup. "That does not sound like Diane," he said. "I mean, your mom was always strict." "Sure. But kicking you out over noise? She used to let us practice drums in the garage." "I know." I said, "That is what scares me. It feels orchestrated." He leaned back. "You know you can crash on my couch, right? It is not huge. And my dog sheds. But you are welcome." I smiled, blinking back tears. "I appreciate it." "Rowan, really. But a couch for a week does not solve the problem. I need stability for the kids. If I move them, I want it to be to a place where we can stay. I cannot bounce them from guest room to couch to motel." He nodded understanding. "Okay, then let me ask around. I know a lot of property managers through my work. Maybe I can find something off-market, something the sharks like your brother do not know about yet." "Thank you," I said. "Just watch your back, Bella," he said seriously. "If Grant is involved, money is moving, and Grant never moves money unless it is moving toward him." When I got back to the house, the atmosphere had shifted from tense to hostile. I walked into the kitchen and saw a notebook lying open on the counter. It was a small, black ledger. I recognized my mother's handwriting. Tuesday, 4:15 p.m. Loud banging from guest room, sustained for 10 minutes. Sounded like furniture being thrown. Tuesday, 6:30 p.m. Children shouting in hallway, disruptive to evening peace. Wednesday, 7 a.m. Heavy footsteps, running, ceiling shaking. I stared at the page. Tuesday at 4:15 p.m. We had been building a Lego tower. The banging was the sound of the plastic bricks rattling in the box. The shouting was Sophie singing a song from daycare. The heavy footsteps were Leo walking to the bathroom in his socks. She was documenting us. She was building a case. I felt a chill go down my spine. This was legal preparation. You do not keep a log like this unless you plan to show it to a judge or a magistrate. She was preparing to evict us formally. I closed the notebook gently. Two could play this game. I went upstairs and retrieved my own notebook from under the mattress. I turned to a fresh page. Wednesday, 2 p.m. Discovery of Diane's log. Entries are exaggerated/fabricated. Banging was Lego play. Shouting was singing. Running was walking. Action will begin audio recording ambient noise levels in guest room to prove normal decibel range. I did not confront her. I did not scream. I just wrote it down. If they wanted a paper trail, I would give them a library. The next morning, the house was empty. Diane was at a hair appointment, and Grant was presumably at his office. I had kept the kids home from the park because Sophie had a slight cough. They were napping in the guest room, exhausted from the tension. I went downstairs to print a few more resumes. The home office was off the living room. It smelled of old paper and dust. I woke up the computer and clicked on the printer icon to check the ink levels. The printer whirred to life. It spat out a single sheet of paper that had been sitting in the queue. Stuck from a previous job, I picked it up. Appraisal appointment, confirmation property. 142 Oak Street, Maple Glen, Illinois. Client, Diane Price. Lender, Horizon Equity Partners. Date, Friday, October 14th. Time, 10 a.m. Friday, that was in 3 days. And the lender, Horizon Equity Partners. That wasn't a standard bank. That sounded like a hard money lender or a cash-out refinance outfit. My heart hammered. An appraisal meant they were valuing the house. You only value the house if you are selling it or borrowing against it. If she was refinancing, why the secrecy? And why did the house need to be empty? Wait, if she was doing a cash-out refinance, the lender would require the home to be her primary residence. If there were other adults living there, especially family members who might claim rights to the property, it could complicate the loan. Or maybe the lender had strict occupancy limits for the type of loan she was getting, or maybe Grant was telling the lender she was the sole occupant to get a better rate. And my presence was fraud. I pulled out my phone and took a clear, high-resolution photo of the document. Then I placed the paper back in the output tray. Exactly how I found it. I backed out of the room, my mind racing. They were mortgaging the house. Grant was cashing out the equity. That was the plan he had mentioned. That was the complication. I was not just a noisy daughter. I was an obstacle to a payout. That evening, Grant came over for dinner. He was in high spirits, cracking jokes and pouring wine for Diane. I ate in silence, feeding Sophie bites of chicken and trying to keep my hand from shaking. After dinner, Grant cleared his throat. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a stapled document. "Bella," he said, sliding it across the table. "Mom and I were talking. We want to make this work. We want you to stay. But we need some structure. This is just a simple household agreement. It outlines the rules, the rent, and the liability stuff. Standard procedure." I looked at the document. Temporary Occupancy and Liability Release Agreement. I flipped through it. It was not simple. It was dense with legal jargon. Occupant agrees to vacate premises upon 48 hours notice. Occupant waives all rights to tenancy protections under Illinois state law. Occupant assumes full liability for any damages. Occupant acknowledges they are a guest, not a tenant. It was a trap. If I signed this, I was signing away my right to an eviction process. They could kick me out on the street in 2 days, and I would have no legal recourse. I looked up at Grant. He was watching me closely, a pen already in his hand, held out toward me. "Just sign it, Bella," he said. "It is just for Mom's peace of mind, so we are all on the same page." I pushed the paper back. "I cannot sign this." "Grant." His smile faltered. "Why not?" "It is standard." "It is not standard," I said, my voice steady. "It waives my rights. It says you can kick me out in 48 hours. I have 2 children. I cannot agree to that." Diane spoke up from the head of the table. "Bella, do you not trust your own family?" I looked at her. I saw the fear in her eyes, hiding behind the sternness. I trust you, Mom, but I do not trust this document. I need to have a lawyer look at it. Grant slammed his hand on the table. The silverware jumped. A lawyer? Are you serious? You are broke. Bella, you are living off Mom's charity, and you want to bring lawyers into this? That is exactly the kind of drama we are talking about. I stood up. I will not sign it without a review. That is my final answer. I took the kids upstairs. My heart was beating so hard, I thought it would bruise my ribs. I had drawn a line in the sand. Now I had to wait for the tide to come in. The next morning, I was loading the kids into the car to go to the library when Marissa's SUV pulled into the driveway. She rolled down the window. Her smile was bright, sugary, and completely terrifying. Bella, holding the fort down? I buckled Sophie in. Hi, Marissa? She got out of the car and walked over, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Look, honey, I know Grant can be intense, but he is just trying to protect Mom. She is really fragile right now. I looked at Marissa. She was wearing diamond stud earrings that probably cost more than my car. She seems fine. Marissa, she seems stressed about money. Maybe, but physically fine. Marissa sighed, shaking her head. It is the stress, Bella. And honestly, it is your attitude. My attitude? I repeated. You are so defensive, she said, placing a hand on my arm. If you just apologized, really apologized, and kept the kids quieter, Mom would calm down. She just wants to feel respected, fight less, smile more, you know? I looked at her hand on my arm. Her nails were manicured a perfect, bloodless pink. The implication was clear. I was the problem. My existence was the aggression. If I would just make myself smaller, quieter, and more compliant, everything would be fine. It was the family script. Bella is difficult. Bella is messy. Bella ruins the peace. I step back, breaking her contact. I am doing my best. Marissa, I got in the car and drove away. I knew what I had to do. I could not win a fight with them. They had the money, the house, and the narrative. If I fought back loudly, I proved them right. If I screamed, I was the crazy daughter. I had to be strategic. I parked at the library, but I did not go in immediately. I sat in the car while the kids looked at picture books in the back seat. I pulled out my phone. I called the number on the card Tessa Hale had given me. Hello? This is the tenant rights hotline. A voice said. Hi. I said, I am not technically a tenant. I am staying with family, but they are trying to make me sign a waiver, and I think they are refinancing the house behind my back. I need to know my rights. I made an appointment for a consultation. Then I opened my job search app. I applied to 3 jobs I was overqualified for and 2 I was underqualified for. I sent emails to 3 daycares asking about drop-in rates. I was not going to save this living situation. It was already dead. I was just trying to survive the funeral. I turned around to the kids. Who wants to go to the playground? I asked. Me, Leo shouted. We went to the playground. I pushed them on the swings. I watched them laugh. I let the wind blow through my hair. I was building a fortress around us. It was invisible, made of documentation, legal advice, and silence. But it was going to hold. I would make sure of it. Friday came and went with the quiet efficiency of a guillotine blade dropping in slow motion. I took the kids to the zoo 2 towns over, burning through a tank of gas I could ill afford, just to ensure the house was empty for the appointment I was not supposed to know about. When we returned at 4 o'clock, the atmosphere in the house had shifted tectonically. My mother was in the kitchen, wiping down the already pristine countertops with a ferocity that suggested she was trying to erase the finish. Her shoulders were up around her ears, tight with a tension that radiated across the room. Grant was there, too. He was leaning against the refrigerator, holding a tumbler of scotch, which was unusual for 4 in the afternoon. He was glowing. There was no other word for it. He looked like a man who had just placed a winning bet on a long shot. Hey, travelers. He boomed as we walked in. How was the zoo? Fine, I said, unbuckling Leo's backpack. Diane did not turn around. She kept scrubbing. Did you have a good day? Mom? I asked, testing the waters. She stopped scrubbing but didn't turn. It was a long day, she said, her voice brittle. Very long. I have a headache. Grant took a sip of his drink. The ice clinking, a sound that made Diane flinch. It was a productive day. Grant corrected. Very productive. We are moving forward. Bella, things are finally happening. What things? I asked. Grant winked. Grown-up things, boring financial stuff. Don't you worry your pretty head about it. I ushered the kids upstairs to wash up. As I walked down the hall, I looked into the living room. The furniture was moved slightly, as if someone had walked around checking the baseboards. The air smelled faintly of a stranger's cologne. Not Grant's. The appraiser had been here. The valuation was done. The noise narrative was melting away, revealing the hard skeleton of finance beneath it. The confirmation came 2 days later, on a Sunday, via a technological slip-up so mundane it was almost laughable. I was in the guest room, folding laundry on the bed while the kids colored on the floor mats. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Marissa. I picked it up, expecting a passive-aggressive reminder about keeping the kids' shoes organized. Instead, it was a screenshot. It appeared to be a group chat titled Project Equity. The participants were Grant, Marissa, and a number I did not recognize. The message from Grant read, Appraisal came in at $450, higher than expected. We have green light on the max cash out. The reply from the unknown number read, Excellent. We need to clear household occupants prior to closing to satisfy the primary residence affidavit. Can we confirm vacancy by the 30th? Grant's reply, Working on it. Pressure is on. She will fold. My stomach dropped so fast I felt dizzy. She will fold. I was the hand they were trying to fold. I was the obstacle. A second later, 3 dots appeared. Then a new message from Marissa, separate from the screenshot. OMG, ignore that. Wrong chat. Then another. Grant is just helping Mom with some budgeting stuff. Nothing for you to worry about. Emoji face with sweat drop. I stared at the screen. My hands were shaking, but my mind was suddenly, terrifically clear. The noise complaints, the logbook, the sudden urgency, the stress. It was all a performance. They needed me out so Diane could sign an affidavit stating she was the sole occupant, or perhaps so they could renovate and flip, or maybe just to secure the loan without a dependent adult complicating the underwriting. Clear household occupants. It sounded like they were exterminating termites. I did not reply to Marissa. I put the phone down. Leo looked up from his coloring book. Mom, you look scary, he said. I forced a smile, smoothing my features. I am just thinking hard. Buddy, like a detective. I realized then that I had to stop reacting and start investigating. If they were treating this like a business maneuver, I had to stop treating it like a family misunderstanding. The next day, Monday, I told Diane I had a job interview. It was a half-truth. I did have a phone screening later, but my primary destination was the Maple Glen Municipal Building. I dropped the kids at a drop-in daycare center that charged by the hour. It cost me $40 for 3 hours, money that made me wince, but I needed to move without shadows. The municipal building was a brick structure that smelled of floor wax and bureaucracy. I went to the Recorder of Deeds office. It was quiet. Just the hum of fluorescent lights and the clicking of a keyboard. I approached the counter. A woman with reading glasses on a chain around her neck looked up. Can I help you? Hi, I said, trying to sound casual. I am helping my mother organize her estate planning, and I wanted to check the public records on her property, just to make sure everything is clean. The address is 1422 Oak Street. The clerk nodded and turned to her computer. She typed for a moment. Diane Price? Yes. Okay, she said. Here's the history. Deed from 1990. Mortgage release from 2012. She scrolled down. Oh, here's a recent filing. A notice of intent to lien from a contractor last year. Looks like that was resolved and released. And, yes, a new credit check inquiry and a subordination agreement filed last week. That usually happens right before a refinance closes. Can you tell who the lender is? I asked. She turned the monitor slightly. Horizon Equity Partners. Horizon, the same name from the appraisal email. And does it say what kind of loan? I pressed. The clerk shrugged. Public records don't show the loan terms until the mortgage is recorded. But based on the subordination, it looks like a cash-out refinance. Someone is pulling equity out of the property. Thank you, I said. I walked out of the building into the bright, indifferent sunshine. My father had paid off that house so my mother would never have to worry. He had worked overtime for 20 years to ensure she owned every brick and beam. Now, Grant was helping her drain the value out of it. Why? Was she in debt? Was Grant in debt? Or was this just greed, leveraging the asset because it was sitting there? It didn't matter. What mattered was that they needed me gone to get the money. The noise was just the lever they were using to pry me loose. I called Rowan from the car. I need to talk to someone who understands property law but won't charge me $400 an hour. I said. Rowan didn't miss a beat. Come by tonight. My Aunt Celeste is making lasagna. She used to be a paralegal for 30 years. She eats landlords for breakfast. Celeste Wynne was a tiny woman with sharp eyes and hands that looked like they were carved from driftwood. Her living room was cluttered with books and smelled of oregano and old paper. She listened to me without interrupting. She looked at the photos of the documents I had taken. She looked at my notebook with the log of incidents when I finished. She took a sip of iced tea and set the glass down on a coaster. They are building a constructive eviction case, she said. Her voice was raspy but strong, but they are being sloppy about it because they rely on you being emotional. What do you mean? I asked. Grant is banking on you getting angry. She said, he wants you to scream at your mother. He wants you to refuse to leave verbally. That way, he can claim you are hostile. The noise is subjective, but hostility and refusal to pay, those are concrete. She tapped the photo of the appraisal. Here is the reality. Bella, you are a licensee, not a tenant, because you have no lease and you haven't paid rent yet. But in Illinois, once you have established residency, which you have, you are entitled to notice. They can't just throw your stuff on the lawn. They want me out by the 30th. I said, that is in 2 weeks. Celeste nodded, because that is likely when their rate lock expires, or when they scheduled the closing. They need the house vacant to sign the affidavit of occupancy. If you are there, the lender might balk. So what do I do? I asked. I can't stay where I'm not wanted. I don't want to stay. I just need time. Then you stop talking, Celeste said firmly. No more kitchen table chats. No more pleading with your mother. You communicate only in writing. You create your own paper trail. She reached for a notepad. You send an email. Tonight. You say, Dear Mom, I am actively looking for housing. To ensure the children have a stable transition, I request 60 days to vacate. I will continue to contribute via household labor and cover our own expenses. Keep it child-focused, she added. If this ever goes to a judge, you want to look like the reasonable mother protecting her kids, not the mooching daughter. I did exactly as she said. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat in the guest room and typed the email. I kept it emotionless. I did not mention the refinance. I did not mention the text message. I just asked for time. I hit send. The response came the next morning. It was not an email. It was a printed letter, slid under my door. Bella, your request for 60 days is denied. This situation is damaging my health. You have until the 1st of the month, 14 days, to vacate the premises. If you are not out, I will be forced to take further steps. Diane, 14 days. Half an hour later, my phone pinged. It was Grant. Hey sis, Mom showed me the email. Look, she is serious. She is at her breaking point. I really don't want to see you guys get the sheriff called on you. That basement studio is still open. Steve said he'd hold it for you if you bring cash today. It's a soft landing. Bella, take it. The urgency was vibrating off the screen. They were panicked. If I wasn't out in 14 days, their deal might collapse. I looked at the text. The sheriff. He was threatening to have his own sister and niece and nephew forcibly removed by law enforcement. I realized then that the brother I grew up with, the one who taught me to ride a bike, who defended me from bullies in middle school, was gone. He had been replaced by a man who saw people as assets or liabilities, and I was a liability. I decided to look at the studio, not because I intended to take it, but because I needed to know exactly what they considered a soft landing for my children. I met Grant's friend, Steve, at the address. It was in a part of town that had seen better days, where the sidewalks were cracked and the streetlights flickered. The house was a rundown bungalow. Steve, a man with grease-stained cuticles and a shifting gaze, led me around the back. "Entrance is here," he grunted, pointing to a concrete stairwell that led down into the earth. He unlocked the door. The smell hit me instantly: damp earth, stale beer, and the unmistakable, acrid tang of black mold. "It is cozy," Steve said, flicking a switch. A single bare bulb illuminated the space. It was a dungeon. The floor was concrete. There was one tiny window high up on the wall, barred with iron. The kitchenette was a hot plate on a plywood table. I saw an exposed wire dangling from the ceiling fan. "Where is the fire exit?" I asked. Steve shrugged. "You go out the way you came in. And the heat?" "Space heaters. I got a couple in the closet." I looked at the dark corners where moisture glistened on the cinder blocks. I imagined Sophie's asthma flaring up within hours. I imagined a fire starting from the questionable wiring and blocking the only exit. This wasn't a home. It was a health hazard. Grant wanted me to put my children here. He wanted me to pay cash to live in a moldy box so he could cash out our childhood home. "No," I said. Steve blinked. "Excuse me?" I said no. "This is not safe. There is no ventilation. The wiring is illegal. And there is mold. I will not bring my children here." Steve sneered. "Beggars can't be choosers." "Lady, Grant said you were desperate." "I am not that desperate." I said, my voice cold steel. "Tell Grant thanks for the offer, but I would rather sleep in my car." I walked away, my heels clicking on the cracked pavement. Feeling a strange sense of power, I had refused the trap, but the pressure didn't stop. It just changed shape. 2 days later, I received a call from my Aunt Linda, Diane's sister, who lived in Florida. We hadn't spoken in months. "Bella," she said, her voice dripping with disappointment, "I am hearing some very concerning things." "Oh?" I said, gripping the phone. "Your mother tells me you are refusing to work," Linda said, "that you are just sitting in that room while the kids run wild and destroy the house. She says she is terrified to leave her room because of the chaos." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Linda, that is not true." I said, "I am applying for jobs every day. The kids are quiet. We are barely there." Linda sighed. "Bella, you have always been independent, but taking advantage of your mother in her old age? It is shameful. She says she offered to pay for an apartment for you, and you turned her down because it wasn't fancy enough." The lie was so bold, so complete. It took my breath away. The apartment was the moldy basement. The refusal to work was me job hunting while parenting full-time. They were rewriting me. They were poisoning the well so that when they kicked me out, everyone would nod and say, "Well, she brought it on herself." I wanted to scream. I wanted to send Linda photos of the basement, photos of my job applications, photos of the pristine guest room, but Celeste's voice echoed in my head. "They rely on you being emotional." I took a deep breath. "Linda, I love Mom, and I am doing my best to respect her home. There is a lot going on that you don't know about. But I am moving out as soon as I can." I hung up before she could scold me further. I sat on the edge of the bed and let one single tear slide down my cheek. Then I wiped it away. I had to get out, not just for shelter, but because staying here was destroying my soul. I called Tessa Hale, the woman from the school office. "Tessa," I said, "I need that list." I spent the next 48 hours making calls. Most were dead ends. Too expensive. No vacancy. No kids allowed. Then, I found a lead. A housing coordinator for the next town over, Lake Briar, had a furnished 2-bedroom unit available. It was a month-to-month corporate rental that was currently empty between contracts. I drove out to see it. Lake Briar was 20 minutes away. a quiet town with a man-made lake and neat rows of townhouses. The unit was on the second floor. It was clean. It smelled of lemon pledge, not mold. It had 2 bedrooms, a working kitchen, and a balcony. The rent was $1,400 a month. It was more than I could afford. If I took it, I would drain my savings in 2 months. I would be living on the razor's edge of bankruptcy. But it was safe. It was available immediately. And it was a fortress where Grant could not reach me. I stood in the empty living room, looking at the beige carpet. I could see Leo building Legos here without fear. I could see Sophie sleeping without me worrying about damp spores in her lungs. I pulled out my checkbook. I will take it. I told the coordinator. I signed the lease. I handed over the check for the first month and the security deposit. My bank account balance dropped to double digits. I drove back to Maple Glen feeling lighter than I had in weeks. I was broke. I was terrified of the future. But I was no longer trapped. I walked into the house. Diane was in the living room, watching TV with the volume turned up high. Another passive-aggressive move to drown out the noise of my children. I stood in the doorway. "Mom?" She didn't turn. "What is it? Bella?" "I just wanted to let you know." I said, "You don't have to wait 14 days. We are moving out on Saturday." She turned then. Her face went slack. She hadn't expected me to solve the puzzle. She'd expected me to break. "Oh," she said. "Well, that is good." She looked away. But not before I saw the flicker of relief. And something else. Guilt? No, that was too generous. It was the realization that she had gotten exactly what she wanted, and she would have to live with how she got it. I went upstairs and pulled my suitcase from the closet. "Pack your toys. Ninjas." I told the kids, "We are going on a new adventure." But as I packed, I didn't feel like I was fleeing. I felt like I was making a tactical retreat. I was leaving the battlefield. But the war wasn't over. They had their house. They had their secret refinance. But they didn't have my submission. And as I folded the clothes, I thought about the appraisal, the clear occupant's text, and the lies told to Aunt Linda. "You want a story?" I thought, "I'll give you a story." But first, I had to get my children to safety. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. The packing process had to be a magic trick. I could not let Leo and Sophie see the boxes as coffins for our time here. They had to be treasure chests for the next place. I sat on the floor of the guest room on Tuesday afternoon, surrounded by our meager belongings. The foam mats were already stacked in the corner. "Okay, team," I said, clapping my hands. "We are playing the sorting game. We have 2 boxes. One is for the toys that need a nap, and one is for the toys that want to ride in the front seat with us to the new castle. Who wants to choose first?" "Me," Leo shouted, grabbing his box of Legos. I watched them carefully. Children are like seismographs. They pick up on the tremors of adult anxiety long before the earthquake hits. I kept my face smooth, my voice light. I let them choose which books to keep out. I let them seal a box with tape. Even though the tape ended up crooked and wrinkled, I was turning their displacement into agency. If they chose what went into the box, they were not being forced out. They were packing for an expedition. Outside the guest room, the house was a minefield. Diane's behavior had fractured into 2 distinct performances. When we were alone in the house, just me, her, and the kids, she was a ghost. She moved through rooms without looking at us, turning up the television volume, retreating to her bedroom with a migraine the moment we entered the kitchen. But the moment a third party appeared, the grandmother mask slid into place. On Wednesday, Mrs. Gabler from next door dropped by to return a borrowed casserole dish. I was in the living room, taping up a box of winter coats. Diane was instantly there, swooping in with a tray of store-bought cookies. "Oh, look at my sweet angels," she cooed, ruffling Leo's hair. "Are you helping Mommy pack? You are such good helpers." She turned to Mrs. Gabler, sighing theatrically. "I am just going to miss them so much. But Bella is so independent. You know, she insists on having her own space. I told her she could stay as long as she needed. But young people today, they need their freedom." I froze. the packing tape dispenser in my hand making a sharp ripping sound. She was rewriting history in real time. She was painting me as the restless daughter leaving a generous mother. Erasing the ultimatum, the rent demands, the threats of the sheriff. I caught Mrs. Gabler's eye. She smiled sympathetically at Diane. It is hard to let them go. Diane, but you have done so much for her. I said nothing. I just smiled, a tight, thin line, and went back to taping the box. I would not make a scene. I would not give them the fuel to say I was unstable. Grant, however, was not content with just a performance. He wanted absolution. He cornered me in the hallway on Thursday evening. I was carrying a stack of towels. He blocked my path, leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed. You know, he started, his voice low and serious. You leaving like this? It is really hard on Mom. I adjusted the towels in my arms. Grant. She gave me an ultimatum. 14 days or the sheriff. I am leaving because she told me to. He shook his head, looking at me with disappointed eyes. It is the way you are doing it. Bella, the coldness, the rushing. She feels like you are punishing her. If you leave angry, it is going to damage her health. She has high blood pressure. You know, if she has a stroke because of this stress, that is on you. The guilt was a physical weight, dropped squarely on my chest. It was a masterstroke of manipulation. We are kicking you out. But if you have feelings about it, you are killing your mother. I looked him in the eye. I am not angry. Grant, I am efficient. I am protecting my children from a volatile housing situation. That is what mothers do. I stepped around him, but I did not leave it there. Celeste's advice rang in my ears. Communicate only in writing. 10 minutes later, from the safety of the guest room, I sent Grant and Diane an email. Subject: Transition Plan. Dear Mom and Grant, I am writing to confirm that, per Mom's request for me to vacate, we will be moving to our new residence on Saturday morning. My priority is to ensure a stable, peaceful home for Leo and Sophie. I am leaving to respect Mom's stated need for space and to comply with her timeline. There is no anger, only a desire to do what is best for everyone's well-being. Bella. I hit send. I had neutralized his verbal poison with a written antidote. If they ever tried to show this to a family court or a relative, they would see a reasonable woman complying with a request, not a vindictive daughter causing a stroke. The next day, I found the smoking gun. It was an accident. I was in the kitchen, packing up the few spices and dry goods I had bought. I reached for a bottle of vanilla extract on the high shelf above the stove, behind a row of cookbooks that hadn't been moved in years. My hand brushed against something that wasn't a book. It was a manila folder, wedged between The Joy of Cooking and a dusty bread-making guide. It slid out and fell onto the counter with a soft slap. The label on the tab read, in Grant's handwriting, Estate Notes/Will Drafts. I knew I shouldn't look. I knew it was an invasion of privacy, but I also knew they were refinancing the house I was standing in to clear me out. I opened the folder. It wasn't just notes. It was a draft of a codicil, an amendment to a will, and there was a typed list of pre-refinance conditions. I scanned the list. Condition 1, title clearance. Condition 2, tax assessment review. Condition 3, insurance update. Condition 4, Bella's occupancy resolved/vacant status confirmed. There it was, my name, reduced to a condition, a checklist item to be resolved, like a leaky faucet or a broken window. But it was the will draft that made my blood run cold. Executive control of the estate to be transferred to Grant Price immediately upon incapacity. Distribution of assets adjusted to reflect Grant Price's contribution to property maintenance and financial management. Bella Price's share reduced by value of room and board provided during periods of unemployment. Grant wasn't just refinancing the house, he was restructuring the entire legacy. He was positioning himself as the financial savior, the one who managed the property, and therefore deserved the lion's share. And he was billing me against my future inheritance for the glass of milk my son drank this morning. I pulled out my phone. My hands were trembling. but I forced them to be steady. I took photos of every page, the list, the draft, the dates. I slid the folder back exactly where I found it, behind the cookbooks. I felt sick. This wasn't just about getting rid of me. This was a coup. I called Celeste from the car while the kids were at the library story hour. I described what I had found. "It fits," Celeste said, her voice crackling over the Bluetooth. "It is a classic move. It is called undue influence, but it is hard to prove while the person is still competent. He is scaring her." "Isn't he?" I asked. "He is making her think she is in trouble so he can rescue her." "Likely," Celeste said. "He positions himself as the caregiver, the financial manager. He creates a crisis, the noise, the stress, the complications, and then he offers the solution. The solution always involves him getting control and you getting cut out. It thrives on silence. Bella, it thrives on family members not talking to each other." I hung up. I gripped the steering wheel. Silence. That was their weapon. I drove back to the house and walked into the kitchen. Diane was sitting at the table, staring at a cup of tea. She looked small. "Mom," I said. She jumped. "I want to have a meeting, a real one, with a mediator." "A what?" she asked, blinking. "A mediator. There is a community center downtown that offers family mediation. I want us to sit down, you, me, and Grant, with a neutral third party, just to talk about the transition, the house, and the future. So there are no misunderstandings." Diane's face hardened instantly. "We do not need strangers in our business, Bella. We do, Mom, because we aren't hearing each other. I found a folder behind the cookbooks." Her eyes widened. "You were snooping?" "I was packing. It fell out." "Mom, the document says Bella's occupancy resolved. It talks about changing your will. Is that what you want? Or is that what Grant wants?" She stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "Grant is helping me. He is the only one helping me. You come here with your problems, your lack of money, your noise. Grant is fixing it." "Fixing what?" I asked gently. "What is broken?" "Mom, everything!" she cried out. It was a raw, terrified sound. Grant walked in the back door then. He must have been in the garage. He saw Diane standing there, flushed and breathing hard, and me standing across from her. "What is going on?" he demanded, stepping between us. "She is creating drama again," Diane said, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She wants to bring in a mediator. She is reading my private papers." Grant turned on me, his face twisting into a sneer. "You just can't leave with dignity, can you? You have to torch the place on the way out. You are upsetting her." "Bella, stop it. I am trying to protect her." I said, "From you." Grant laughed. It was a cold, sharp bark. "Protect her? You can't even pay rent. I am the one keeping this roof over her head. Now get out of the kitchen. You are leaving on Saturday. Until then, stay out of her sight." I retreated, not because I was weak, but because I saw the look in my mother's eyes. She wasn't looking at me with anger anymore. She was looking at Grant with total, desperate dependence. He had her. That evening, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't have saved, but the area code was local. "Hello? Bella? It is Nora Klein." Nora was my mother's oldest friend. They had played bridge together for 40 years, Nora. "Hi," I said, surprised. "I probably shouldn't be calling," Nora said. Her voice sounded thin, worried. "But I heard you were moving out. Diane told me." "Yes, on Saturday. Listen, Bella, I saw Diane at the pharmacy yesterday. She was not herself. She was shaking." "What did she say?" I asked. "She kept saying she was afraid of losing the house. She said the taxes were eating her alive and that she had made mistakes with her savings. She said Grant promised to fix everything, but only if she followed his plan exactly. She said she had to be tough with you, or the plan wouldn't work." I closed my eyes. "She thinks she is broke? She thinks she is on the brink of foreclosure." Nora whispered, "Is she?" "No." I said, "Dad left her a pension. The house is paid off. She has Social Security. She shouldn't be broke, unless someone convinced her she is. Nora said, "Thank you for telling me." "Nora, I promised I wouldn't say anything," Nora added, "but I remember you when you were a baby." "Bella, you are a good mother. I don't like what is happening." I hung up. The picture was complete. Grant had manufactured a financial crisis in Diane's mind. He had convinced her that her stability was crumbling and that he was the only buttress strong enough to hold it up. My presence, my noise, my cost, was painted as the wrecking ball. I had to try one last time. It was Friday night. The boxes were packed. The car was loaded. I found Diane on the back porch. It was dark, the only light coming from the kitchen window. She was wrapped in a cardigan, hugging herself. "Mom," I said softly. She didn't tell me to leave. That was a start. I stood near the railing, looking out at the dark yard. Nora called me. I said, Diane stiffened. "She is worried about you. She says you are scared of losing the house." Diane let out a shuddering breath. "It is complicated. Bella, you don't understand the markets, the inflation, Grant says." "Forget what Grant says." I interrupted gently. "Look at me. I am your daughter. I am not a tenant. I am not a liability. If you are in trouble, we can look at the books together. We can go to a financial advisor who isn't Grant." She turned to me. Tears were streaming down her face. For a moment, I saw the mother I remembered, the one who put Band-Aids on my knees. "I am so tired. Bella," she whispered, "I am just so tired of worrying. He says it will all be fine if I just clear the decks. Clear the decks." That was me. I was the debris on the deck. "Mom, you don't have to do this. You don't have to refinance. You own this house." She squeezed her eyes shut. She shook her head violently, as if shaking off a spell. No, it is already in motion. I signed the papers. I can't go back now." "He said I can't go back." She opened her eyes. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by a wall of panic-fueled resolve. "You need to go. Bella, please, just go. I need you out. If you stay, it ruins everything." She turned her back on me and walked into the house, locking the sliding glass door behind her. I stood alone in the dark. I realized then that you cannot save someone who is drowning if they are clinging to the person pushing them under. Saturday morning was gray and crisp. The move was surgical in its precision. I didn't ask for help. I carried the boxes myself. I buckled the kids into the car. Grant was there, leaning against his sports car in the driveway, watching me like a prison guard, ensuring the inmate actually leaves the premises. "Need a hand?" he asked mockingly. "No," I said. I did not say goodbye to him. I went back inside for one last check. Diane was in her bedroom with the door closed. I knocked. "Mom, we are leaving now." There was silence. Then, a muffled voice. "Goodbye, Bella. Drive safe." That was it. No hug. No kiss for the grandchildren. Just a voice through a closed door. I walked out. I got in the car. "Where are we going?" Sophie asked from the back seat. "To the new castle," I said. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway. I didn't look back at the house. I looked forward. At the road leading to Lake Briar, the drive took 20 minutes. When I unlocked the door to the townhouse in Lake Briar, the air inside was still and clean. It smelled of potential. We carried the boxes in. We ordered pizza and ate it on the living room floor. Leo built a castle out of the cushions. Sophie danced in the hallway. Nobody shushed them. Nobody complained about the thumping. I felt a physical weight lift off my shoulders. My bank account was decimated. My heart was bruised. But we were free. I was poor. But I was safe. The first week was a blur of settling in. I got the kids registered for the local school. I started my new job at the medical billing firm. A stroke of luck, landing it just days before the move. But strange things started happening with the mail. I had set up mail forwarding with the post office the day I left. But for the first week, I received nothing. No bills, no junk mail, no flyers. It was as if my existence had been paused. I called the post office. They said the forwarding order was active. Then, on Friday of the second week, a bundle arrived. It was thick, wrapped in a rubber band. I flipped through it. Electric bill for the old place, final notice, a coupon book, a letter from the insurance company, and then, stuck to the back of a magazine, a heavy white envelope. It was addressed to Diane Price, but the address was my new address in Lake Briar. I frowned. Why would Diane's mail come here? Unless the forwarding system had gotten confused, or unless someone had listed my new address on a document associated with her name. I looked at the return address, Horizon Equity Partners. It was marked confidential, loan approval documents. I knew I shouldn't open it. It was a federal offense to open someone else's mail, but the address was mine, the unit number was mine, and my gut told me this was the smoking gun. I carefully steamed the envelope open over the kettle. Inside was a notice of final approval and disbursement. Dear Ms. Price, we are pleased to inform you that your cash-out refinance for the property at 1422 Oak Street has been funded. Per your instruction, the net proceeds of $450,000 have been wired to the designated joint account ending in 8892. Please find enclosed your copy of the promissory note and the occupancy affidavit. $450,000. That was nearly the entire value of the house. They had stripped it to the studs. I flipped to the signature page. There was Diane's signature. It was shaky, the lines wavering. And below it, a witness signature. Grant Price. But it was the stamp next to Diane's signature that made me gasp. Signed under Assisted Review Protocol. I looked it up on my phone. Assisted review was a designation used when a borrower has physical or cognitive limitations and requires a designated party to explain the terms and guide the signing process. Grant had formally designated our mother as incompetent, or at least limited enough to require his assistance to get the loan approved. He had used her fragility to bypass the safeguards. And the money? It was in a joint account. I sat at my kitchen table in Lake Briar, the paper trembling in my hand. He hadn't just kicked me out. He had liquidated our family home, labeled our mother incompetent, and moved $500,000 into an account he controlled. And he had sent me to a moldy basement so I wouldn't be there to see the mailman deliver the proof. I looked at the letter. Bella is finally free, the outline said. I was free, but they were not. I took a picture of the document. Then I resealed the envelope with a glue stick. I would mark it, return to sender, wrong address. I would send it back. But now I knew. I knew exactly what the noise was covering up. And I knew that when the money ran out, and it would run out, with Grant in charge, Diane would have nowhere to go, and I would be the only one left standing. The silence from my mother was not empty. It was heavy, like the air before a tornado touches down. I sat at my kitchen table in Lake Briar, the sealed envelope from Horizon Equity Partners sitting in front of me like a radioactive isotope. I had resealed it, marked it return to sender, and dropped it in the mailbox, but I could not unsee what was inside. $450,000. Assisted review. I called Celeste first. She listened to my description of the document, her breathing steady on the other end of the line. You cannot accuse him of fraud yet, Celeste said. If you accuse him, he will circle the wagons. He will tell Diane you are trying to declare her incompetent so you can take her money. You have to pivot. You have to offer support, not an indictment. So I drafted a text message. I deleted it 3 times before I hit send. Mom, I received some mail for you by mistake regarding a loan approval. I returned it to the sender, but I noticed it mentioned an assisted review process. I am worried that you might be feeling pressured to sign things you have not fully read. If you ever want a second set of eyes on the paperwork, someone who is not me and not Grant, I can help you find a neutral advisor. I just want to make sure you are protected. I stared at the screen. It was gentle. It offered an out. Diane did not reply. 1 day passed, then 2, then 3. I checked my phone obsessively, hoping for a sign that she was waking up, but there was only silence. It was the silence of a woman who had been told that her daughter was the enemy. and who was too afraid to test that theory. On the fourth day, a Tuesday, I was home early from my new job. I was in the kitchen, chopping carrots for a stew. The rhythmic thwack, thwack, thwack of the knife against the wooden board was soothing. The kids were in the living room, building a fortress out of cardboard boxes we had not yet broken down. The doorbell rang. I froze. I was not expecting anyone. I did not know anyone in Lake Briar yet, other than the leasing agent. I walked to the door. I did not unlock it. I peered through the peephole. Grant was standing on my welcome mat. He was wearing a polo shirt and khakis, looking for all the world like a casual, friendly uncle dropping by for a visit. He was holding a plastic bag from a toy store. My heart hammered against my ribs. How did he get my address? I had not given it to him. I took a deep breath. I engaged the chain lock. It was a flimsy piece of brass, but it was a boundary. I opened the door 3 inches. "Grant?" I said. He smiled. It was a bright, practiced smile that did not reach his eyes. His eyes were scanning the slice of the apartment he could see behind me. "Hey, Bella," he said, his voice booming too loud for the hallway. "Just happened to be in the neighborhood showing a property. Thought I would stop by and see the new digs. Check on the rugrats." He lifted the bag. "Got them some slime. Kids love slime, right? I did not take the chain off. We are busy." "Grant," I said, "and we are just settling in. It is not a good time." He chuckled, but the sound had an edge to it. He took a half step closer to the door. "Come on, sis. I drove all the way out here. Just let me come in for 5 minutes. I want to see how you are living. Make sure you are safe." The way he said safe made the hair on my arms stand up. It sounded less like concern and more like an inspection. He wanted to see if I was failing. He wanted to report back to Diane that I was living in squalor, or that I looked tired, or that the kids were crying. "We are very safe," I said, keeping my voice level, "but we are not accepting visitors right now. In the future, please call before you drive over." His smile faltered. The muscle in his jaw jumped. "I am family. Bella, I do not need an appointment. You do now." I said. I saw his hand twitch, as if he wanted to push the door. For a second, I measured the strength of the chain against the weight of his shoulder. Then he laughed. A short, sharp sound. "Fine. Play it that way. I was just trying to be nice. Mom is worried sick about you. You know, she thinks you are out here struggling. I just wanted to bring her some good news. Tell her we are doing great." I said, "Goodbye, Grant." I closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood and listened. I heard his footsteps heavy on the stairs. Then I heard the engine of his car rev aggressively in the parking lot before fading away. I went back to the kitchen. My hands were shaking so badly I had to put the knife down. He had not come to visit. He had come to mark territory. He wanted me to know that moving 20 minutes away did not mean I was out of his reach, but I was building a wall he could not climb. And the first brick of that wall was financial independence. I had landed a job at Northgate Claim Solutions. It was not glamorous. It was a medical billing firm located in a sterile office park that smelled of ozone and stale coffee. My job was to process denied insurance claims, hunting for coding errors and fighting with adjusters. It was tedious, repetitive work. It required staring at spreadsheets for 8 hours a day until my eyes burned. But it paid $22 an hour. When my first direct deposit hit, I logged into my bank account and stared at the number. It was not a fortune. It was barely enough to cover rent, utilities, and daycare, but it was mine. It was money that did not come with conditions. It did not require me to be quiet, or grateful, or invisible. I picked the kids up from daycare that afternoon. "Guess what?" I said as they climbed into the back seat. "What?" Leo asked. "We are going out for dinner. We went to a diner down the street. It was a chrome and neon throwback with red vinyl booths and a waitress named Barb who called everyone honey. We ordered pancakes for dinner. I let them order milkshakes. Are we rich now?" Sophie asked, sucking on her straw. I laughed, a sound that felt rusty in my throat. "No, baby. We are not rich, but we are okay. We can pay for our own pancakes." I watched them eat. I looked around the diner at the other families. tired parents, messy kids, old couples drinking coffee. Nobody was looking at us. Nobody was judging the volume of our laughter. For the first time in months, my shoulders dropped away from my ears, but the peace was a thin layer of ice over a deep, dark river. 2 days later, I met Nora Klein for coffee. Nora had texted me, asking to meet near my office. She looked nervous when I walked in. She was shredding a paper napkin into tiny confetti on the table. "Bella," she said, standing up to hug me. "You look tired." "I am working." I said, sitting down. "Working is good." She nodded, looking down at her coffee. "I saw Diane yesterday," she said quietly. "She came to Bridge Club. She was wearing a new brooch, very expensive looking, and she was talking about a cruise." "A cruise?" I asked. "A river cruise in Europe? For next summer?" She said Grant booked it for her as a celebration. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. The refinance money had been in the account for less than 3 weeks, and already the spending had started. Nora leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Bella, I have to tell you something. It has been eating me up. What is it?" I was there. The day she signed the papers, Grant asked me to come over to witness the signatures, because the notary was a friend of his and they needed a second party. "You watched her sign the loan documents?" I asked. Nora nodded miserably. "It was so fast." "Bella, Grant had everything laid out on the dining room table. Stacks of paper. He was flipping the pages for her. He kept saying, 'Sign here, Mom, sign here.' Did she read them?" She tried to. At one point, she put on her glasses and started to read a paragraph about the interest rate. Grant put his hand over the paper. He laughed and said, "Don't read all that, Mom. It is just legalese. I already read it. It is standard." "And she signed?" She looked at him. She looked scared, like a little girl who does not want to get the answer wrong on a test. She said, "Are you sure, Grant?" And he said, "Do you trust me? Or do you want to lose the house?" So she signed. I closed my eyes. "Do you trust me? Or do you want to lose the house?" It was coercion. Plain and simple. "I am so sorry." "Bella," Nora said, reaching for my hand. I should have said something, but he was so confident, and Diane seemed so relieved when it was over. "It is not your fault, Nora," I said, though a part of me felt a spike of anger that she had stood silent. "But now we know. There is more." Nora said, "What?" "Marissa. She called me yesterday to ask for the name of my kitchen contractor. She said they are finally doing the renovation they have wanted for years. She said, Grant finally got his bonus." I stared at Nora. Grant is a real estate agent in a slow market. He does not get bonuses. He gets commissions. And unless he sold a mansion last week, he does not have $50,000 for a kitchen renovation. He is skimming, I said. He is taking the money from Mom's account and calling it his bonus. Nora's eyes filled with tears. She gave him access. Bella. She added him to her checking account. She told me it was for convenience so he could pay her bills. Convenience, the thief's favorite word. I left the coffee shop with a burning sensation in my chest. It was not heartburn. It was the need for action. I could not save the money that was already spent. But I had to stop the bleeding. I made an appointment with Halston Reeve Legal Group. It cost me $300 for a 1-hour consultation. I paid it with my credit card, wincing as the machine beeped. The attorney was a woman named Sarah Halston. She was sharp, brisk, and not prone to coddling. She listened to my story, looked at the photos of the will draft, and listened to my recounting of Nora's testimony. "Here is the hard truth. Ms. Price," Sarah said, leaning back in her leather chair. "Your mother is a competent adult. In the eyes of the law, she has the right to make terrible financial decisions. She has the right to give her money to her son. She has the right to take out a bad loan, but he lied to her." I said, "He told her she was losing the house. He told her not to read the documents. That is undue influence." Sarah agreed, but proving it is incredibly difficult. Unless you can prove she lacks capacity, that she has dementia or a cognitive impairment, Grant can argue that he was just advising her and she chose to follow his advice. So I can do nothing? I asked. I just have to watch him rob her? Not nothing, Sarah said. You can request documents. You can push for transparency. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. If he knows you are watching, really watching, he might slow down. She paused, tapping her pen on the desk. But you need to watch for the red flags of total control. The power of attorney. If he gets a durable power of attorney, he does not need her to sign anything anymore. He can drain the accounts, sell the house, and change the beneficiaries without her even being in the room. He doesn't have that yet, I said. At least, I do not think so. Make sure he doesn't. Sarah said. Encourage her to get independent counsel and document everything. I went home. I sat at my computer. I decided to stop playing the game of polite silence. I decided to turn on the lights. I opened my email. I drafted a message to Diane, Grant, and Marissa. Subject: Timeline of events and questions regarding 1422 Oak Street Mom. Grant, Marissa. I am writing this to ensure we are all operating with the same set of facts. Over the last month, several events have occurred that concern the long-term stability of Mom's estate. First, October 12th, Grant informs me that I must leave due to noise complaints. Second, October 14th, an appraisal is conducted at the house for the purpose of a refinance. 3. October 16th, Grant drafts a list of pre-refinance conditions requiring the house to be vacant. 4. October 20th, I am given a 14-day ultimatum to vacate. Woo. November 1st, a cash-out refinance is finalized with Horizon Equity Partners for $450,000, signed under assisted review. 6. November 5th, Grant gains access to Mom's primary checking account. I am not asking for money. I am asking for clarity. Why was the refinance necessary if the house was paid off? Where are the proceeds being held? Why was I told the issue was noise when the documentation proves it was a condition of the loan? Mom, I love you. I am afraid that you are being isolated and that your assets are being transferred without your full understanding. I am asking simply for transparency. Bella, I hit send. The reaction was almost instantaneous. My phone rang. It was Grant. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Marissa. I let it go to voicemail. Then, the text started. Grant, you are unbelievable. After everything I have done for this family, you are ungrateful, toxic, and jealous. Do not contact me again. Marissa, how dare you? Grant is working himself to death to save that house. You abandoned her. I am crying right now because of how cruel you are. I stared at the messages. They were panicked. They were the lashings out of people who had been caught. Then, a single text from Diane. Stop humiliating me. The words hit me like a physical blow. My chest tightened until it was hard to breathe. She did not see my email as protection. She saw it as exposure. By laying out the facts, I had shown her that she had been duped, and her pride could not handle it. She would rather be robbed by the son who flattered her than saved by the daughter who told her the truth. I put the phone down. I did not reply. I went into the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. You are not humiliating her. I told my reflection. You are witnessing her. The next day, I was at my desk at Northgate, headphones on, typing data into a claim form. My cell phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. I thought it might be Grant calling from a burner phone to scream at me, but I picked it up. Hello? Hi. Is this Diane Price? A woman's voice asked. It sounded brisk, professional. No, this is her daughter. Bella, can I take a message? Oh, I apologize. The woman said, I have this number listed for the borrower. This is Kelly from the title company. I am just calling to let her know that the final disbursement check cleared, and we are sending over the power of attorney packet she requested. I froze. The power of attorney packet? I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. Yes, the woman said. Mr. Price called, and said the previous draft had an error in the agent designation. So we corrected it. He wants to get it signed this week so he can finalize the investment transfer. We are overnighting it to the Oak Street address. I felt the blood drain from my extremities. Okay, I said. I will let her know. I hung up. The power of attorney. Sarah Halston's warning flashed in my mind like a neon sign. If he gets a durable power of attorney, he does not need her to sign anything anymore. He was going for the kill shot. He was going to have her sign over total control, likely under the guise of fixing an error or investment transfer. I looked at the phone. If I called Diane, she wouldn't believe me. She would think I was humiliating her again. If I called Grant, he would accelerate the timeline. I forwarded the voicemail I had instinctively recorded to Sarah Halston. Then I called Nora. Nora, I said, I need you to do something brave. Oh, Bella. Nora sighed. I don't want to get in the middle. You are already in the middle. I said, you watched her sign the loan. Now he is sending a power of attorney. If she signs this, she ceases to be a person with rights. She becomes a checkbook. There was silence on the line. What do you want me to do? I want you to go to her house, I said. I want you to take her to lunch, and I want you to take her to an appointment I am going to make with an independent elder law attorney. Not Sarah Halston. Someone totally new. Someone Grant doesn't know. She won't go. Nora said, tell her it is about the cruise. I lied. Tell her she needs to update her travel will before she goes to Europe. Tell her whatever you have to tell her, but get her in a room with a lawyer who will actually read the document to her. I can't go, I added, my voice breaking. If I go, she will fight. If I go, it becomes about me versus Grant. It has to be you. You are her friend. Nora hesitated. Then, she let out a long breath. Okay, I will go over there tomorrow. Thank you. Nora. I hung up. I sat in my cubicle. Surrounded by the hum of productivity, I felt like a general who had just ordered a strike on his own position. I was stepping back. I was removing myself from the equation. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. I wanted to drive over there, kick down the door, and tear the papers out of Grant's hands. I wanted to shake my mother until she saw the truth. But that was the old story. That was the story where I was the noisy, chaotic daughter. In this new story, I was the strategist. I was the ghost in the machine. I went back to my spreadsheet. I typed in a code. Patient stabilized. I typed, monitoring for adverse reaction. I waited for tomorrow. Wednesday was the longest day of my life, and I spent most of it staring at a spreadsheet of denied insurance claims for patients I would never meet. My phone sat on the desk next to my keyboard, silent and face up. Every time a shadow passed over the screen, my heart jumped, expecting the call from Nora. I had orchestrated a coup from 20 miles away. I had sent my mother's oldest friend to intercept her before she could sign away her autonomy to my brother. It was a gamble that could result in two things: my mother's salvation or my permanent excommunication from the family. At 2:15 in the afternoon, the phone buzzed. It was Nora. I grabbed it and walked quickly to the break room, which was empty except for a vending machine humming in the corner. Bella? Nora's voice was shaky. She sounded like she had just run a marathon. I am here, I said, leaning against the cold wall. Did you go? We just left the office. Nora said, I took her to see Arthur Pendleton. He is an estate attorney I used when my husband passed. He is expensive, but he is honest. And? Nora let out a long, ragged breath. Oh, Bella, it is worse than we thought. My stomach dropped. Tell me. Diane thought she was signing a bridge loan. Nora explained. She told Mr. Pendleton that Grant explained it as a short-term liquidity measure. He told her they would take the cash out, fix up the kitchen, pay off some phantom debts he convinced her she had, and then refinance again in 6 months when rates dropped. He told her it was temporary. And what is it really? I asked. It is a high-interest, subprime mortgage, Nora said. The interest rate is 9.5%, and there is a prepayment penalty. If she tries to pay it off or refinance within the first 3 years, she owes a penalty of $20,000. 9.5%. On $450,000. The monthly payments would be astronomical. It would eat her entire pension and most of her Social Security. There is more, Nora said. Her voice dropped to a whisper. There is a balloon payment clause. In 5 years, the entire remaining balance comes due. I closed my eyes. A balloon payment. Grant had set a ticking time bomb. In 5 years, Diane would be 70 years old, and she would owe the bank nearly $500,000 in one lump sum. She would have to sell the house to pay it. And Grant knows this? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Mr. Pendleton asked to see the disclosure documents, Nora said. Grant had initialed the page explaining the balloon payment. He knew. He absolutely knew. How did Mom take it? She went silent. Nora said. She just sat there in the leather chair, clutching her purse. She turned very pale. Mr. Pendleton asked her if she understood the terms when she signed, and she whispered. Grant said not to read it. He said he handled it. Did she sign the power of attorney? I asked, the most important question hanging in the air. Nora exhaled. No. Mr. Pendleton read the draft Grant had sent over. He told Diane, Mrs. Price, if you sign this, your son can sell your house tomorrow and put the money in his own pocket, and you would have no legal recourse. Diane took the packet, tore it in half, and put it in her bag. I slid down the wall until I was crouching on the linoleum floor. The relief was so intense it made me dizzy. Where is she now? I asked. I dropped her at home. Nora said. She didn't want to talk. She just said she needed to think. But Bella, she looked furious. I have known your mother for 40 years. I have seen her sad. I have seen her anxious. I have never seen her look like she wanted to burn something down. Thank you. Nora, I said, my voice thick with unshed tears. You saved her. We saved her. Nora said, I went back to my desk, but I could not work. I sat there, imagining the scene playing out at 1422 Oak Street. The silence of that pristine house was about to be broken, and for once, it would not be by my children. I did not hear from Diane that night. I did not hear from Grant. The silence stretched into Thursday. Then, on Thursday evening, my phone rang. It was Grant. I stared at the screen. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but I needed to know the lay of the land. I needed to know if the enemy was retreating or reloading. I answered, Hello? Grant? Bella, he said. His voice was different. It was lacking its usual boom, its usual condescending cheer. It sounded tight, compressed, like steam trying to escape a pipe. I was just talking to Mom. He said, Oh? Yeah, she is having a bad week. She is confused. Confused? I repeated, keeping my voice neutral. She went to some lawyer, Grant said, spitting the word lawyer like a curse. Some guy Nora found. He filled her head with a bunch of worst-case scenarios. Scared her half to death. Now she is claiming I tried to rip her off. Imagine that. I said. Grant sighed. A sound of exaggerated patience. Look, you know how she gets. She forgets things. I explained the balloon payment to her 3 times. I explained the rate. She doesn't retain information like she used to. I had to act fast to get her that liquidity because she was panicking about money. I was trying to help her. You mean you were trying to help yourself to the equity? I said, Stop it, he snapped. I am the one taking care of her. I am the one driving her to appointments. I am the one handling the maintenance. And now she is yelling at me, saying I used her. She is not herself. Bella, I think she is slipping, competence-wise. I gripped the phone. He was pivoting. The narrative was shifting from Mom is stressed by Bella to Mom is senile. If he could paint her as incompetent, he could challenge her revocation of his authority. He could try to get guardianship. She seemed pretty sharp when she tore up the power of attorney. I said, there was a silence on the line, a cold, heavy silence. So you know about that, he said softly. I know everything. Grant, I saw the appraisal email. I saw the will draft behind the cookbooks. I saw the letter from Horizon Equity Partners. I know you signed under assisted review. He laughed, but it sounded nervous. You are paranoid. You always have been. And then, he played his ace, or what he thought was his ace. Look, Bella, let us put this aside. Mom is miserable. She misses the grandkids. She is rattling around in that big house all alone. And she is crying all the time. If you just drop this, if you stop poisoning her ear with this legal nonsense, I think she would let you come back. I froze. Come back? Yeah. You can move back into the guest room. No rent. I will talk her down. We can go back to how it was. You get your free housing. I manage the finances, and everyone is happy. We just need to calm her down. I looked around my apartment in Lake Briar. It was small. The carpet was beige. The view was a parking lot. But on the floor, Leo was building a city out of blocks, humming to himself. Sophie was drawing a picture of a cat at the kitchen table. There was no tension here, no walking on eggshells, no shushing. Grant was offering me the very thing he had taken away, thinking it was the ultimate prize. He thought I was desperate. He thought my dignity had a price tag of $0 a month. And in that moment, I realized the full truth of the last 2 months. The noise complaints, the rules, the rent. It was never about peace. It was never about my children being too loud. It was about leverage. He had squeezed me to get me out so he could get the loan. Now he wanted to squeeze me to get me back in so he could control the narrative again. If I was in the house, I was dependent. If I was dependent, I was silent. No. Grant. I said, what? I said no. I am not coming back. Not now. Not ever. You are making a mistake, he said, his voice rising. You are broke. Bella, you are going to struggle out there. I would rather struggle on my feet than live on my knees. I said, do not call me again. I hung up. I blocked his number. 10 minutes later, my mother called. Her voice was small, stripped of the imperious tone she had worn like armor since I arrived in Maple Glen. Bella? Hi, Mom. I saw Grant. She said, I know. He called me. He said I was confused. He said he told me about the balloon payment. He stood in my kitchen. Bella. And he looked me in the eye and told me I was losing my memory. She let out a sob. It was a jagged, painful sound. I was not confused. Bella. I was scared. He told me the market was crashing. He told me I had tax liens. He told me if I did not sign that day, I would lose everything. I trusted him. I was scared, and he used it. I know, Mom, I said gently. I know. I fired him. She whispered. I told him to get out of my house. I told him he's not allowed to touch the checkbook. I went to the bank this morning with Nora and removed him from the account. Good. I said, that is good. Mom, but the money is gone. Bella. He spent nearly $50,000 in 3 weeks. He paid off his car. He paid off his credit cards. He gave Marissa money for a contractor. It is gone. We will figure it out. I said, Mr. Pendleton can help you see if you can recover it, or maybe press charges. No, she said sharply. No charges. I cannot. I cannot have the police involved. He is my son. I cannot send my son to jail. The line was drawn. She would stop him, but she would not punish him. She would protect herself. But she would also protect the family reputation. It was a half measure, but it was hers to make. Bella? She asked, her voice trembling. Yes? Grant said. He said he offered to let you come back. He did. Please come back, she said. The house is so quiet. I hate the quiet. I am sorry about the rent. I am sorry about the noise complaints. I want my family back. I closed my eyes. I could hear the desperation. A part of me, the daughter who wanted her mother's approval, wanted to say yes. It would be easier financially. It would be fixing things. But I looked at my kids. If I went back, I would be stepping into a war zone. Grant would be circling. Diane would be emotional and needy, using me as a shield against her own loneliness. The dynamic hadn't changed. Only the villain had been unmasked. I could not raise my children in a house built on secrets and fear. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I love you, but I cannot move back." "Why?" she cried. I said I was sorry. "Because I need to be safe." "Mom, and so do the kids. We have a home here now. We have a routine. I cannot disrupt their lives again. But I am alone. We will visit. I promised. We will come for Sunday dinner. We can meet at the park. But we will not live there. Those are the terms. I want to be your daughter, not your tenant, and not your bodyguard." There was a long silence. I could hear her breathing. She was waiting for me to cave. She was waiting for the guilt to work. But I did not speak. I held the silence. "Okay," she said finally. Her voice was cold again, the wall going back up. "If that is what you want, it is what I need," I said. She hung up without saying goodbye. It was an imperfect resolution. There was no grand reconciliation. She was hurt that I had rejected her offer. She was too proud to beg further, but the boundary was set. In the weeks that followed, the fallout settled like ash over Maple Glen. Grant and Marissa did not go quietly. They began a whisper campaign that filtered back to me through the few high school friends I still spoke to. The story they told was a masterpiece of projection. They told people that I had turned Mom against them. They claimed I had manipulated a senile old woman to cut off her devoted son so I could grab the inheritance for myself. They claimed I was poisoning the family from my apartment in Lake Briar. My Aunt Linda called me one evening. "Drunk on sherry and righteousness, I heard what you did to your brother." She slurred. "After all he did for that house, you should be ashamed. Bella, breaking your mother's heart." I did not argue. I did not try to explain the predatory loan or the balloon payment or the moldy basement studio. I just said, "Linda, you are welcome to believe whatever version helps you sleep." And I hung up. I focused on my world. I focused on Northgate Claims Solutions. I was promoted to a team lead position after 2 months because I noticed a recurring error in the coding system that saved the company $10,000 a month. The raise was only $2 an hour, but it meant I could afford internet and a weekly pizza night. I focused on the kids. Leo made a best friend named Sam. Sophie stopped flinching when she dropped a toy. We were happy. It was a small, quiet happiness, but it was real. But the story wasn't quite over. One afternoon in December, a letter arrived at my apartment. It was forwarded from Diane's address, but this time, it was addressed to me. It was from Diane. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a photocopy of a letter she had received. "Dear homeowner, we are contacting you regarding the appraisal scheduled for 1422 Oak Street on January 15th. Please confirm access for our field agent." It was a form letter, but at the bottom, Diane had written a note in her shaky cursive. "Bella, I found this in the mail. Grant says he canceled everything. But this looks new. I do not know who ordered it. I am changing the locks today." I stared at the paper. Another appraisal. That meant someone was still trying to leverage the house. Maybe Grant had opened a line of credit before he was removed from the account. Maybe he had forged a signature on a second application. Or maybe the financial storm Diane was in was deeper than even she knew. And creditors were circling. She was still vulnerable. The house was still a target. I texted her. "Good job changing the locks. Do not let the appraiser in. Send a cease and desist letter." "I can help you draft it," she replied with a thumbs-up emoji. It was the first time she had texted me in a month. It was a truce. The final scene of our drama played out a week before Christmas. The Maple Glen Community Center held a Winter Wonderland event every year. It was neutral ground. Neutrality was the only place we could exist together. I brought the kids. They were excited to see Santa. We walked into the gymnasium, which was decked out in tinsel and fake snow. The air smelled of popcorn and damp wool. I saw them across the room near the hot cocoa station. Grant was wearing a cashmere sweater, looking every inch the successful real estate mogul. Marissa was by his side, laughing too loudly at something the mayor's wife said. They looked perfect. They looked untouchable. Then, I saw Diane. She was standing a few feet away from them. She was not laughing. She looked older than she had 2 months ago. Her posture, usually so rigid, was slumped. She was holding a styrofoam cup, looking at the floor. She looked up and saw us. Her face lit up with a fragile hope. She took a step toward us. Grant turned. He saw me. His expression went blank. It was a mask of total erasure. He looked at me, then looked through me, as if I were a ghost he refused to acknowledge. He turned his back, putting a protective arm around Marissa, cutting Diane off from view. It was a power move. He was claiming the social space. He was signaling to the room that he was the patriarch, and I was the exile. Diane hesitated. She looked at Grant's back. Then she looked at me. She was standing in the middle, physically and metaphorically. She was caught between the son who robbed her but flattered her, and the daughter who saved her but defied her. I did not make it hard for her. I did not force her to choose in front of the town. I knelt down to Leo and Sophie. Okay, guys, we saw Santa. We got our candy canes. Who wants to go home and watch a movie? We do, Sophie cheered. I stood up. I caught my mother's eye one last time. I nodded. A small, barely perceptible dip of my chin. I see you. I am here if you need me. But I am not staying. She gave me a small, sad smile. She raised her hand in a tiny wave. I took my children's hands. We walked out of the gymnasium, past the gossip, past the lies, past the family that had tried to consume us. The winter air outside was biting and cold, but it felt clean. I buckled the kids into the car. Did we have a good adventure? I asked. Yes, Leo said. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment before starting the engine. I pulled out my phone. I sent one text to Nora. We were at the holiday party. Grant ignored us. Mom looks tired. I'm heading home. If anything changes, if he shows up, if she gets another letter, if she seems scared, call me, day or night. I hit send. I was not abandoning her. I would never abandon her. I would be her safety net, her legal researcher, her truth teller, but I would not be her victim. I started the car. I drove out of Maple Glen, past the sign that promised a wholesome community, and turned onto the highway toward Lake Briar. The road ahead was dark, but my headlights cut a clear, steady path through the night, and for the first time in a long time, the only noise in the car was the sound of my children singing along to the radio, and that was music to my ears. Thank you so much for listening to Bella's story. This was a journey about breaking cycles, finding your voice, and the painful reality that sometimes winning just means getting out with your soul intact. I would love to hear from you in the comments. Where are you listening from today? Have you ever had to draw a hard boundary with a family member to protect your peace? If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to Revenge Stories for more realistic, emotional dramas about justice and resilience. Don't forget to share your thoughts in English below. I read every single one. Until next time, keep writing your own ending.